factual. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
What Kenya can learn from India's electoral journey, and also looking at how we've been able to carry these processes through previously. Both of you gentlemen, we welcome you in a way in which we normally do. We go around the African continent every week. We land in a different country and we come back with their proverbs. Dennis does, at least. Yes. And he's literally actually come off a plane. We would like to share that proverb with you. He'll tell you where we are. We'd love to get your interpretation of it. All right.
So today we are in Ivory Coast, also known as Cote d'Ivoire. And fun fact about it is 40% of cocoa beans that the world consumes comes from that country. So there's a high possibility, guys, that the chocolate might just originated from Ivory Coast.
Very possible.
Eh? Yeah. And then so we also, another fun fact about Ivory Coast: when you hear Drogba, you know Ivory Coast. When you hear Gavinho, you know Ivory Coast. When you hear big Yaya Toure, Ivory Coast.
Yes.
Kenya, when you hear Okari, Ogam, Okari, you know Kenya. But let's go to the proverb today. A single tree cannot make a forest. A single tree cannot make a forest. I'll start with you, Balozi. How would you interpret that? What does that mean?
Well, that's a profound quote. What comes to mind, I'll say, is that a forest is much more about an independent unit. It's about how the tree, the animals, the plants, the flora, fauna, the whole ecosystem comes together. I'll say it's about how a lot of these units come together, help each other, support each other, and that's how it thrives as a system. So what I take away from it is 1 and 1 is more than 2. There are some synergies that come together and increase the value of it.
Yeah. So how would you interpret that?
Precisely like I said, I think for me it's the place of a community in an enterprise. For you to be able to achieve much, for you to be able to get more done, you need to be more than just one person. So the need for community, collaboration, coordination amongst the various components of society, in this case trees, then becomes important.
Well said.
Indeed. Absolutely. And even as we go into this conversation, I'm just thinking already overwhelming numbers, and then how are you able to sort it out? We're going to look at the Indian subcontinent and how elections are carried out, but we're going to do that coming from the Kenyan experience and also looking into a future experience that Kenya hopes to have. So we'd like to start with you, Marcus, and you've been looking into observing elections in Kenya over time. Let's look at procedure and numbers. How has that operated in the past? Kenya tops has never gone beyond 21 million votes. Never. Beyond 20 million votes, regardless of who have registered or who not, right? So we're talking 20 million votes. Maybe all of those votes are cast in one day, and maybe it takes 3-4 days, 5 days, and then you start to hear, maybe some days, 24 hours later, 3 days after that. If it goes into court, then we're in the whole thing for another 2 weeks. But more or less, about a week or so, all of this happens over time. From an observer point of view, and then, one of the followers, how would you say that elections are carried out in Kenya? And I'm not talking procedure, I'm talking overall general feeling.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's interesting that the numbers you're talking about. So in terms of numbers, we are about 22 million registered voters.
Yes.
In terms of how we conduct our elections, generally speaking, in the country, so we do 6 ballots on a single day. Important to note is that this is something that is not very unique to our country, but it's very unique, generally speaking, for first-time voters. So we do 6 ballots. We have the county elections and the national elections happening on the same day. So it's considerably a very massive exercise, comparative to the region. The second thing that I would like to say is that, again, the commission, that is the election management body, the IBC, is the body that is mandated to conduct these elections. So it may outsource the officials, like, get hold of the polling officials, either teachers, farmers, traders, to support that exercise. And up to 500,000 election officials are engaged on the elections day.
Okay.
So it's a massive training that is done at the national level, cascaded at the regional levels, then they're deployed on the elections day. Then, of course, the election officials will include not only the presiding officers and their deputies, but also clerks, the police officers. So it is an exercise that is well planned and well thought through. Of course, a number of actions then occur, including educating the voters on what not to do and what to do, looking at the procedures in terms of observers, media, and other actors and agents are also allowed in a polling station. So it's essentially, in my view, as an observer, a very transparent process where everyone is allowed. If you are accredited by the commission, then you have an access to these processes, and you can monitor them, you can observe them, and of course, probably give you a view in terms of their compliance to the legal framework and other institutions and other international best practices.
Best practices.
Yes.
Okay, Rishab. Let's go to the Indian subcontinent, which, give or take, 1 billion people. All right? And an election, you have one for regional body county. What would equate to a county in Kenya? That is larger than Kenya in terms of number. That's just one area. Give us your overall look about how an election is carried out, and how many registered voters do we see in Kenya, and how long does it take for people to go and cast their ballots?
Okay. Thank you so much for the question. Since you were just comparing the counties to a state, to the whole of Kenya for numbers, I'll just say our population is around 1.4 billion, of which in the last elections in 2024, we had over 960 million eligible voters.
These are registered?
These are registered voters.
Okay, all right.
And the people who voted were a little over 650 million.
650 million
people
votes. All right.
Went and cast their vote.
Okay.
So it's like the whole of African population going to vote together, just for comparison. And how the vote is cast, I'll say it starts before dawn. And in terms of the processes and organization, it's very similar to what Marcus just said. We have the Election Commission of India, which is the overarching body that looks after the organization of elections, and from there it flows down. It's a constitutional body, and we also, for instance, Marcus just said that 500,000 people are in the part of organizing the process. In India, that's 15 million people who are involved in the process of getting the election done.
In one day, this election happens?
No, this election doesn't happen in one day, of course, because the numbers are so huge. For instance, in the 2024 election, which just happened last year, we had it was around 44 days that the election went across 7 phases. Because, again, these are many people, and India is also a very, very diverse country, right? So geographically, these are places which are very distant from each other. So it's a phase-wise election. And but for one constituency, it's designated that a person will go on this day. That day is a holiday for us. You go in the morning, you cast your vote, and then you come back. That's more or less how it looks like.
Marcus, you hear about 900 million registered voters, and then you hear 600 million individuals who come out to vote. And you still look at the logistical aspect of it all. In Kenya, we talk about 22 million people, and the numbers who came out to vote still low if you compare. But then again, in managing the logistics of these, one would argue, is always a nightmare. And with increased numbers in the coming elections, that still is going to be a nightmare. And one would want, if we just compare how Balozi will respond on how India has managed to handle the logistical nightmare and how Kenya should learn from them, or vice versa.
I think just before we started, we had this conversation with him in terms of you're talking about over 900. You say 900 million registered voters, out of which you have about 650 million Indians standing out to vote. So you're talking about now the strategic materials alone. To transport the ballot boxes, the ballot papers, to print them, the stamps, assuming they use the same thing that we use. That is, in terms of scale, in terms of planning, in terms of thinking, in terms of transportation, is massive exercise. And like they told me during our chit chat that, unlike our country where we have to outsource, the polling officials, in India everybody's involved. You told me civil servants are used in managing these elections. You can't try that in our country, that you have a chief or a police or an OCS, or you have someone else coming to run your elections.
Why?
Kenyans don't do that. We don't involve government officials in our elections. So
is it a legal issue or what?
It's a trust issue. It's a trust issue. So again, maybe we'll say it. I think in terms of with the 22, look at even the printing of the ballot boxes, papers. It's I think I would like to hear how they do their printing, what they print. In country or out country, that is also very important. But in our case, in terms of logistics, it is a nightmare. So you talk about 6 ballot papers, assuming that in every polling station in our country, the cap is at 700 voters per polling station. So you talk about 700 times 6 ballots. That then of course you have a few excesses here and there for the cases of where a person might need more than one, and then you transport them across the 44,000 plus polling stations spread across the 1450 electoral wards in our country. So the commission must hire. It must hire. Yet government has vehicles also. So we hire transport companies to transport these materials. You also hire police officers to help in terms of security of these materials. You also hire where they are stored. So outsourcing this is as a cost implication, but also a trust implication.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, if I may, how did, because one thing that jumps out at us right now is the trust issue, and it wouldn't just be India, that there are other jurisdictions. The United States, for example, runs its entire election on a volunteerism program, whereby their folks, your normal Joe or Jane, could actually sign up to be an election volunteer in the next election, and they get their accreditation and they're good to go. So how did the Indian subcontinent, whether it's a governance issue, how did you get people to trust that somebody could be working in another capacity and not necessarily have to be a member of staff of the Electoral Commission to work in an election? How do you do that?
Right. I think it has a lot to do with the history and from where we have come. Because, see, in India, the civil services are independent, and enjoy a lot of trust from the people. And by civil servants, I mean all parts of the government machinery. So these are police officers, these are, as you mentioned, clerks, and these are administrative officers, these are revenue officers. So it's a whole of a government exercise that happens, because again, if you look at the numbers, when I say we are looking at 15 million people who are involved in the process of organizing the elections and going to different places of the country, you really can't have that many people as volunteers, because then that includes, because in India we have more trust in the government system and the people that are in place than the volunteers, I'd say. Because it's mandated, it's structured, and these people have been trained, know what they're doing. And at the end of the day, it's the trust comes from the fact that these elections have happened many times in the past, over the last more than 75 years of our electoral democracy. So that trust has built over time, I'd say.
Okay. Marcus, when you talk about trust and civil servants, one would always say at any given point that a civil servant will always speak the language of the government. And we talk about, say, let's take, for example, the 2027 general election, that if President William Ruto would be running for second term, one would assume that the civil servants would be singing to his songs. So pretty much the trust aspect of trusting a civil servant to deliver that, throw that out of the door. But here we're talking about an election that civil servants are there, they know their role, they are independent, and they do their job. In Kenya, the electoral agency itself is independent, and one would want to say it is independent. But then again, it is the body that is mandated to deliver the elections to Kenyans. So how do we then as a country deal with the trust issue and ensure that whoever has been given the mandate to deliver, whether it's prescribed in the constitution, that IEBC, and even if it's hiring or whatever, that Kenyans will get to trust them and that they will offer a credible election?
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, the major problem we have in our country in terms of trust, you trust your M-Pesa systems, you trust your teacher, you trust your doctor, when you go, your pilot, the matatu driver in the morning that takes you from town to your place. You know that when you enter into that matatu, you will get home, or your Uber driver.
Yeah.
But the only place that I've seen Kenyans have quite mistrust on is on elections. And a number of things happen here. First is our history, where elections have been heavily contested. So the contestation around elections is a big issue. Number two, again from history, again you have to understand that Kenyans are coming from in 1992, 97, 2002, and then 2007. Without, when we never had this new constitution that we're having today. So a lot of mysteries were around our elections, a lot of opaqueness were there in these elections. So that mindset from Kenyans is taking so long to come out from. So they don't trust you. We don't trust you. We will label you already, depending on how you speak, what language you speak, where you come from, is a big issue in elections, because elections is about resources. So when these resources are unevenly distributed across the country, so Kenyans are very suspicious on the person who wields power. That's the first thing. So the second thing is also about institutions that Kenyans have put to themselves to manage these elections. The IEBC is just one of those institutions that are supposed to help in these elections. We think IEBC is the only body that delivers elections. IEBC must work, as you say, the tree. Elections is like a tree, Ivory Coast. IEBC is just a forest. You said a forest, isn't it? Yeah. So the election, for you to deliver these elections, you must have a forest idea where the National Police Service play their role, the media yourselves play your role, the IEBC play their role, that at the end of the day, then elections is delivered according to what we have put down in our constitution. So when these institutions do not do what they're supposed to do, like you saw the split screen in 2022, when you see the police handle or mishandle voters, when you see IBC officials in one way or the other mishandling voters, then we have a big problem. So the trust deficit in institutions also plays a very key role. So, like other countries, I was in Ghana in December. I was shocked. Maybe Kumar will tell us. I was shocked in Ghana that the ballot paper boxes are in the police stations. They were in the police station. The boxes were in the, after guys had voted, they were all heaped in a nearby polling station. There was no problem. Police were just there. The community was there. The PO was just there. There was just an open process. So the trust in these institutions is critical.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.